Hi, I'm George Nordhaus, and today I have an old friend and somebody that you know too, Roger Sitkins, on the phone. Roger writes. You see his stuff all over everywhere. He was an agent way back in the in hinterlands and in Michigan, and then he came down. He became a consultant, and he was one of the top consultants in the country. Maybe between him and Gary Holgate, his partners at the time, I mean, they were the consultants that everybody used and have. And eventually he started something called Sitkins International. You've probably heard about it. You can contact him. I'll give you a contact at the end, as usual. But you see Roger in Rough Notes all the time. He writes there constantly. And he's done a heck of a job with that. And I read it every week, every month. And then I saw this last time, or a couple, 3 months ago, the top 10 producer mistakes. And boy, that resonated with me big time. I said, my gosh, nobody's ever come down and said these are the ones. But it was more than the top 10. How many were on it, Roger? About 18 or something like that?
Oh, there were about 18, and we tried to boil it down to the top 10 here.
Okay. And maybe you can... let's see if we can talk a little louder so that people can hear us if we can.
Okay.
That's better. Yeah, that's good. And I don't mind doing that. People understand that. What's the agenda?
Well, we're going to go through today and talk about the things that I see where the producers literally are shooting themselves in the foot. I think every producer wants to grow. I think a lot of times they, quite frankly, lose interest or lose energy, and they don't realize that they're really making mistakes, and they get frustrated, and then they get to a point where they really plateau, and they plateau at that $300,000 or $400,000 range of gross commission income, and they're making a pretty darn good living compared to their peers. But they really don't know what it takes. They don't know what's holding them back. So what I want to talk about today are those things that I see that really do hold producers back. They're mistakes that they're making. So we're going to talk about these 10 things. Number one is the service trap. 2, one of my favorite sayings, practice quoting and really no practice quoting. 3, empty pipelines. Next, whether you're a general practitioner or a specialist, not being prepared to play the game, not really being relentlessly prepared. Thinking that every account is a great account, lack of differentiation, poor relationship management, relationships are still important, no client plans, and then maybe the largest one in all of them is a lack of accountability. So those are the 10 that I see, George.
I think you're probably right. Well, let's go into the first one, the service trap. That was you guys, you and Gary. This was your thing. I think you got people really understanding the first time back in the 80s, 90s. Maybe 70s late, that this was important, and it really is important but we didn't realize it until you guys talked.
Well, our original theme, the theme that Gary originally developed and we really took nationwide, was 80-00, and the 80-00 theme was that the producers had to be available to sell 80% of the time. We'd have a 0 backlog and 0 accounts receivable over 30 days. So that became pretty well known. But the more I worked on it, the more I started creating strategies to help producers grow, I realized that they really were caught in a service trap. You know, they are supposed to be salespeople, but the reality is they spend more time servicing than they do selling and renewing. So the question here on the handout is, are you a part-time or a full-time producer? Well, a full-time producer spends 80% of their time in sales and sales-related activities. Sales-related activities we see are, number 1, of course, selling. Number 2, the renewal process, we call the continuation process. 3, relationship management. And 4, pipeline building. But for most producers, they spend the majority of their time in service issues. They're really caught in service. And really what happens is they're hiding behind activities, and they never demand results of themselves. I can't tell you how many times I hear producers, and they'll be at a seminar. I gave a seminar just last week here in the Fort Myers, Florida area, which is unusual. I didn't have to get on an airplane. But at the break, all the producers ran out, and they were on their cell phones going, do you have anything for me? Is there anything going on? And they're really asking for activities, and they're not doing those things that really get them results. And I think one of the things the producer has to understand, it's the agency that provides the service, not the agent. And I think it's a crucial point here, because all the time the producers go, call me, I give great service, I do this, I do that. Well, you're a lone wolf there, you're standing alone. It is the agency that provides the service that frees up the producer to go out and produce more. And one of the themes that we really push at our producer training camps is that as a producer, you never receive 100% of the commission on your book of business. And of course, if anybody was paying that, they'd have every producer in the world. Well, why is it they don't get 100% of the commission? Because they have outsourced the service. Outsource is such a big word now. They have outsourced service to the agency, and that's why they only get 30 or 40% new and 25 or 30% renewal, because they have outsourced service. And so
it's a good thing. That's a good thing, isn't it? Yeah, no, I was saying that's a good thing, isn't it? That they outsource service.
It's a great thing, because that's the unique abilities, the factory installed equipment for a producer is not servicing. It's really selling and relationship management, and we've got great internal staff that provides outstanding service. And so when you look at it and you say, okay, service has to happen because we have to sell something. That's where everything starts. Then we have to service it. But if we give poor service, we lose the account. Well, what I see is when the producer looks at the two most important things they have, their time and their money, you can't give both to service. So give it part of the money your book creates, but don't give it time. You're already paying someone else to do it. So the service trap is crucial because we just have to do a strong service handoff and create a very effective high-performance team that takes care of the client. So that's really the first mistake we're seeing.
The second one is something that I think you made up. Not made up, created the words, because I never heard it until you said it. Practice quoting.
Practice quoting. I'd love to have just 10% of the resources wasted in agencies that are giving quotes to people who, quite frankly, don't have an interest in moving, who are just going through, in the old days, the yellow pages. Now, of course, they're just covered up by messages online, on TV, on the radio, call and get a quote, call and get a quote, call and get a quote. And producers will go out and they'll literally give a quote to somebody who says, we're just trying to keep our current agent honest. Oh boy, okay, I'll give you a quote. I might get lucky. What we see is that the average agency and average producer has a closing ratio way less than 25%. In other words, 1 in 4. Most agencies is probably 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 in commercial, okay? And so think of the resource that is wasted chasing people who are not serious, chasing people that, quite frankly, we don't have the rules of the game. We don't even know what it's going to take for them to move their account. Our definition of practice quoting, the art of providing a quote to an unqualified prospect in order to get the incumbent agency to lower their price while retaining the account. I think it's just a lot of wasted resource. So one of our rules we teach, the best day to lose the sale is when? It's the first day. If you get in there and they're not qualified, get out now. Don't waste any more resource on it.
Good point. Number 3, empty pipelines. Where have I heard that song before?
Oh, boy. If we could solve that one, we'd all be squad billionaires. We see a normal improvement cycle that producers go through when we work with them. And it's 4 steps here. It's number 1, improving their conversion ratio. Now, conversion ratio is what % of the first appointments move forward to the second appointment. And in our approach to selling, the first appointment is an executive briefing. It's really a risk-based conversation based upon risk-based questions that get the prospect to realize that what they're getting from their current agency really isn't helping them control their total cost of risk. It isn't helping them become more attractive to the insurance marketplace. But yet what we see is the vast majority of producers and agencies never measure what I consider to be one of the most important critical indicators, or KPI, key performance indicators, of conversion ratio. So what % of first appointments move to second? And the second appointment in our process is a risk assessment, a risk reduction workshop. Second thing they improve is closing ratio. Of those people that go through the whole process, what % of them say yes versus what % say no? So we get our first 2 things, conversion ratio, closing ratio. Then we work on revenue per relationship. You may not know this, George, but I remember back the first time I ever saw you speak. It was in San Francisco at a IMMS convention, and you stood up there and you said the size of your book of business and the size of your agency will be directly tied to the size of your average account. And boy, did that stick with me. The revenue per relationship has got to constantly grow. We've got to continue to raise the bar on the size of account we personally sell and the size of account we personally are qualified to handle. If you think of it logically, if I've got a great conversion rate, a great closing rate, great revenue per sale, then the only thing I have to worry about is my quantity and quality of at-bats. And that's what it really boils down to. And something I think about a lot, think about the best life insurance sales managers. My dad was a life insurance guy. He worked with John Hancock for 32 years. And some of my best friends in the business are life insurance guys by nature. And I think of one of my friends who took a MetLife office from almost last in the country to first in the country 3 years in a row. And I asked him, what did you do? He said, well, we had to have appointments. I said, well, okay, I understand that. How did you make it happen? He said, it's pretty simple. If you were a producer working for me, you could not leave the office on Friday until you had 15 appointments booked for the following week. I said, well, how did you know that? He said, I stayed there, and they had to show me their calendar. Now, again, this is a number of years ago, but I said, you'd stay there? He said, yeah. And I said, well, first of all, why 15? He said, well, we knew that if we booked 15 appointments, 10 of them would happen, 6 of the people would want to move forward, and we'd make 3 sales. So as long as they had 10 lined up, we'd have a pretty good week and month and quarter and year. And he said it was just a numbers game for us. And I said, well, how late did you ever stay? He said, the latest I ever stayed was 11 o'clock one evening waiting for one of my young guys to fill it up. Well, the bottom line is that we've got to get quantity, which is very important, and then, of course, more importantly, quality of at-bats. We don't want an at-bat doing a practice quote. So in our perfect world, when we look at filling up the pipelines, we do what we call ROPE. And those of you that have read my stuff or seen me live know that I love acronyms. So ROPE, Referral Only Production Explosion. How do I get to the point that every account I work on is a referral, or even more importantly, it's an introduction? Well, because I'm constantly working on doing those things with my current clients and centers of influence that get me referrals and get me introductions so that my pipeline is always overflowing. George, we talked about no practice quoting just a second ago. Why is it that so many people practice quote? Why would a producer work on an account that their gut says, there's no way you're going to get this one. This guy's just using you. And, of course, the producer says, shut up, gut, I might get lucky on this one. Well, the reason a producer will work on an account they know they're not going to get, and by the way, your team knows it too when they go to the market with it, the reason they'll do it is because they have nothing better to do. So our overall teaching is how do we get to the point where our pipelines are overflowing, we have more opportunities than time, and we always have something better to do. So the pipelines are crucial to all of this.
Okay, one more time on the ROPE. What's it stand for again?
Referral Only Production Explosion.
Ah, I love your acronyms. I see them all the time. I think you have more acronyms sometime. Never mind. Anyhow, the fourth mistake. Yeah, right. Mistake number 4 I like to is a general practitioner or specialist.
Yeah, when I look at it, and we look at the producers that we work with that eventually go through our sales mastery program, and these people are all, either right at $1 million or certainly striving towards $1 million of revenue, and then looking for even a higher book of business. And the vast majority of them are not general practitioners; they're specialists. If you think of any industry, any profession, specialists will always make more money than general practitioners, whether it's law, medicine, accounting, consulting. We're specialists. We only work with independent insurance agents and brokers. That's all we work with. We'll not consult with any other type of business. It's always within the insurance industry. So specialists will always make more money. Now, the key to specialty is that you have the industry knowledge. You can speak the language of your prospect. I mean, let's face it, if I'm a producer and I go into a restaurant account, and I've never called on one before, and someone says Ansel system, I say, what? What's an Ansel system? Guess what? I probably don't have a lot of knowledge. I have to be able to speak the language of the industry I'm working with. And certainly that's why we're such big proponents of the risk survey questionnaires, et cetera, that Rough Notes has in their producer online program. It's phenomenal, and yet most commercial accounts do not have a risk survey or risk assessment done. Boy, you talk about going in and making a difference, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So specialists know the business. They know the risk factors. They know the emerging risk that's going to face that type of business. And they truly have an attitude that, you know what, insurance is one of the solutions we have. It's not the only solution. And unfortunately, George, for most general practitioner type producers who, they're still going to do okay, but they'll never do great, and they'll probably never get to financial freedom. Most of them, all they come in and talk about is insurance. And where we get our people positioned is, look, insurance is one of our solutions. It's not our only solution. We're going to help you deal with risk, okay? So what are the tools that the producer has that helps them deal with risk, helps them deal with controlling total cost of risk, helps them have discussions with the prospect that says, there are different types of risk. There's strategic risk, hazard risk, and business risk. And then when we look at risk, how do we identify it, quantify it, prioritize it? Well, if you're a specialist, you can have that sort of a discussion versus being someone who's a general practitioner and says, hi, nice to see you. Let's take a look at your policies. I'll copy them. I'll give you a quote, and I'll pray that maybe you like what I did for you. Just a totally different game.
I really like that. As I'm listening to this, Roger, incidentally, you haven't lost a thing in all these years. You still got it, boy. And I love to hear you talk. But as we're talking about this, I want to remind people this stuff is masterful stuff. This is all give it to every producer. I mean, we're not finished, but I just want you to think about that now. Every producer in your agency should hear this. Make sure they do. I mean, it's just that good of stuff. This is all archived on Rough Notes homepage, roughnotes.com. You can see it there, but get them on this thing, because this is gut level stuff, Roger, and I'm loving it. What about number 5?
Thanks, George. Number five is kind of a good one here. If we can get this page to work. Sometimes the computers don't want to work the way we want them to.
Yeah. Well, I know that, yeah. Maybe go back a little bit and maybe forward. It'll do that maybe sometime, too. Does that?
Nah, sometimes it's just locked up here. Hold on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to escape here, and we'll come right back.
Yeah, well, we can do that. And while Roger's doing that, he'll get that leather back on. That happens a lot. Here it is, Roger. You're pretty good at that. You had it there.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah, okay. Not prepared to play. There you go. Okay.
All right, so mistake number 5, not being prepared to play. I'm amazed at how many times producers will go in and blow an opportunity. I firmly believe that every opportunity, every event deserves your very best. So no matter when you're out there, you have got to be prepared. And by the way, it shows. We've all had salespeople call us that are just not prepared to play the game whatsoever. And a big part of it is just they're not willing to practice. They just don't practice anything. They don't practice their skills. They don't practice asking for referrals. They don't practice dealing with objections. They don't practice their rehearsals, their presentations. And it's really amazing when we talk about practice. Most of them will go out and practice their golf game or their tennis game or whatever, but they won't practice that, which really gets them their career, gets them their money, gets them towards financial freedom. And we say there are normally 2 or 3 types of practice: low risk, medium risk, and high risk practice. Well, low risk practice is when you're in the office and, quite frankly, you're just practicing asking questions, or again practicing presentations, doing a presentation rehearsal in front of your peers. Medium risk practice is when you've got something new you're doing, like in our case when people move towards the risk reduction approach and they're going out and installing the risk reduction approach with their existing clients. That's medium risk practice. High risk practice is when you're going out in front of a brand new prospect, a targeted account, and you've never tried anything new or different. You're not prepared to meet with them at all, and you blow it. Now, most people don't like low-risk practice. They do more high-risk than low-risk. The reason they don't like low-risk, and we'll say, do you film yourself? Oh, no, I wouldn't want to film myself. Do you ever record yourself on the phone? Oh, no. I think we can all remember the first time we ever heard our voice or saw ourselves on video and say, God, do I sound like that? Do I really look like that? Yeah, you do. And when I ask them, I said, why aren't you willing to practice in front of your peers? Well, I always hear some variation of, you know what, I just don't want to look stupid. My response, George? If you're going to look stupid someplace, it better be in the agency in front of your peers, not out there and blow a great opportunity. And so much of it is a lack of research. Let's face it, in today's world, it's so easy to learn so much about the prospect you're going to see. We have a rule that we instill within the producers, and some do it, some don't. We can't make people do what they don't want to do. But we say, look, if you're really serious and you're really prepared, before you ever go out on any targeted prospect, if I'm your sales manager, you need to send me either a voicemail or an email with the first 3 risk-based questions you're going to ask this prospect based upon the research you've done on their business. Because the worst thing a salesperson says today is, hey, nice to meet you, so tell me about your business. What do you guys do here? Wow, you are unprepared and I don't have time for you. So the more research we can do, the more practice we can do, we are now relentlessly prepared, relentlessly prepared to play the game. And guess what? That shows too. Prospects appreciate the professionalism.
Really fascinating. I never really thought of it that way. I'm going to go ahead and start filming myself. Now you got me worried. Now you say that the next one is every account is a great account. Yeah. How about a little bitty one or something?
Yeah, every account is a great account. Anybody that can fog up a mirror and pay in American dollars, I'm pretty sure I'll talk to them. And we just see producers, this really gets back to confusing activity with results too, is that we're just chasing the wrong accounts, and we might be really excited because we wrote a whole bunch of minimum premium BOPs today. Well, if I'm a brand new producer and I'm out there playing in the traffic, just trying to learn the game, that's one thing. But when I get serious about it, number one, I have mass, minimum account size. I draw a line in the sand and I just say, I'm never going to write another account that falls below this minimum. Because, again, size of your book of business, George, is based upon the size of the average account. So we draw a line in the sand and just say, I'm going to start targeting people that are above X. And then the next one, past targeted account size itself. So mass is minimum. That's the smallest account I write. Mm-hmm. Past targeted account size really gets more towards this next bullet point of ideal future client. The old saying that without a goal, without a plan, all roads lead there. Well, it's the same thing. If I don't know what an ideal future client looks like for me, then I'll chase everybody. Easiest way to find out as an individual producer what an ideal future client looks like, take a look at your top 10 accounts, find the common characteristics among them, and now start replicating them. That's your future ideal client. Rudy and Ruby are in here. It's kind of a funny thing. One of our great members out in California, one day in an online session, a sales meeting we were running, I asked the group, I said, who's your guy? And I got some feedback. What do you mean, who's your guy? I said, who's your guy? Who's the guy you want to chase? What's that future client look like? Because every account is not a great account. The reality is that most agencies lose money on the bottom 50% of their customers and don't realize it. And what we wind up having is we have profitable accounts subsidizing unprofitable accounts. That's a whole other story. But when we start saying, who do we really want to add? Well, this agency took it to heart. They had a great brainstorming session about it, and then this was great when the movie Rudy was still pretty popular, et cetera. And they said, Rudy's our guy. And they called me and said, okay, we've got Rudy. In fact, we're going to send you a picture of him. And what they did is they went and got a mannequin, a male mannequin. They put on nice golf slacks on him, nice loafers, a golf shirt with the agency logo on it. And then on the wall next to it, it said Rudy. And then there was a definition of Rudy. And then they did research, and they found there, I think it was 642 prospects. And they were in a large metropolitan area out in the West Coast, George. 642 prospective companies that matched up against Rudy. Then they started specific marketing to them, looking for referrals to them, et cetera. And every time they wrote an account that was a Rudy, they printed out the logo of the account and started pinning it on his clothes. And the goal was to cover him up. Everybody went, that's a pretty good idea. And then this was really a fun agency, and they would go to happy hour every once in a while. And they actually a couple times took Rudy to the bar with them on Friday afternoon just to reinforce it. Wow. Well, then the benefits producers were saying, hey, what about us? Okay, let's get Ruby. So we had Rudy as the P&C ideal future client and Ruby as the ideal future client for the benefits, and that's where they got a female mannequin, dressed her up, same thing, a nice lady slacks and a golf shirt. And they actually, that summer, when they had their company picnic, Rudy and Ruby went to the beach with them. So it was a great event for them.
But at least they recognized you. Yeah, that's great. Great idea.
So the biggest thing overall here with an account not being a great account is if the account's a part-time client. You have to have full-time clients. I don't know why you would ever write an account. And okay, there are always some reasons. Make sure they're not excuses, by the way, or alibis. But the reality is a future client is a full-time client. We write everything for them because we absolutely know that it's the number one exit barrier we can have with a customer that drives retention is to have all of their business, period. And that's commercial, it's benefits, it's life and financial services if you do it, it's VIP personal lines. But just think of the dollars. Gosh, George, you and I have been talking about this for a million years. The dollars that are sitting there where producers just don't have the full account or the agency doesn't have it. It's crazy.
Well, I'm working on something on that, Roger. I'll talk about that at another few places. But you're totally right. That point alone has motivated me to do a lot of thinking and a lot of new creativity. But be warned, I'm coming out. Okay. Next one is lack of differentiation. Amen, brother.
Boy, mistake number 7. They're all the same. And in fact, how many times have we all heard this? Oh, you insurance guys are all the same. Yeah, if you want to take a look at my account, go ahead. And like I said earlier, yeah, we're trying to keep our current agent honest. We quote it every 2 to 3 years, et cetera. And that really is the old way of selling. And I mentioned it briefly earlier, but the old way of selling is look, copy, quote, and pray. I'm going to look at your policies. I'm going to copy your policies. I'm going to quote your policies. I'm going to pray I've got a price that you like. And oh, by the way, it's followed by begging because you won't return my call. Okay? So that's the old way, and it really is hysterical activity on the way to the grave as far as I'm concerned. Will you still do okay? You know, you used to, but the old saying, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. I think in today's world, you're going to get a lot less if you keep selling the old way because there's a whole bunch of people that are now selling the new way. And we believe the new way is much more of a challenger model. It's much more of dealing with risk. Again, our selling system, as I mentioned, is all about how do you control your total cost of risk? How do you look more attractive to the insurance marketplace? How do you deal with emerging risk in your business? So the new way of selling is, number one, based upon a ton of research where you're identifying the future ideal client. You research the marketplace. You know the ones that fit that profile. You then contact them, and our goal for the first appointment is we want to see them off season. We want to see them around the 6-month anniversary of their current account to go in and do an executive briefing and have that risk-based conversation with them. It's not a presentation. It's a conversation about risk and how what you do is different, not only what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. And then if they agree to move forward that it's so different than what they've heard before, then we'll go in and do the risk reduction workshop, a risk assessment, and then finally we'll come back and present a risk reduction plan. But again, it's about being different. And here's a litmus test, okay? You're dealing with a prospect that you've never met them before, and you come in and you're having a conversation with them, and you tell them your story, how you're different. If you don't hear from the prospect something along the lines of, wow, no one's ever asked me that question before. Wow, I've never heard anything like that before. Wow, I didn't know I could help to control my total cost of risk. Wow, I didn't realize that insurance is just one of the parts of total cost of risk, not the major part of it. If they're not hearing wows, George, they're still doing it the old way. So when I look at it, I say, well, if you can't tell your story in 30 seconds or less, then you probably sound like everybody else, which means you've got a ton of competition. So if someone says to you at a cocktail party or a networking event or whatever, hey, what do you do? And you say, I'm in the insurance business. Well, it's a great way to end a conversation if you don't like the person you've just run into. By the way, as I mentioned, I'm in the insurance business, and they leave. But if they say, what do you do? And you say, well, we have a very unique business model that we use. It's known as the risk reduction approach. It's designed to help our clients control their total cost of risk and become more attractive, and it focuses on risk assessment and risk plans. That's what we do. Well, that took me way less than 30 seconds to say, but I just basically used 3 key words there. Here's my model, here's what it's designed to do, and here's what it focuses on. If I can't tell my story in 30 seconds or less, I'm not unique. I sound like everybody else. I've got a ton of competition. So it really comes down to this point here. What's your unique selling approach, okay? What is it that you do that is so unique? And some people call it the unique selling proposition. It's the unique and appealing ideas and things that separate you from all other Me Too competitors. And let me repeat it, George, because I said it fast. It's the unique and appealing ideas and things that separate you from all of the Me Too competitors. So what's your story that makes you different? Because if you're not different, boy, do you have a lot of competition.
Beautiful. I repeat, everybody who's listening to this, get every one of your producers to listen, because, boy, I'm learning a whole lot, Roger. I've heard you do this for 100 years, and I've learned about 5 or 6 things. I'm making my own notes as fast as I'm talking to you here. The
well,
8th
George,
one,
you know,
what? Go ahead.
At Sifkins, we've got to keep getting better, too. So.
Well, I know you do, and we all do, obviously. The 8th one is interesting. I want to talk about that a little bit with you. Poor relationship management. What do you mean?
Well, you know, relationships are always important, and there certainly are people that do relationship selling only. We believe in more of a challenger sales model now, but we do know how important it is to have great relationships and have a great brand with that relationship. So the types of relationships that should be proactively, not reactively managed: clients, prospects, the insurance carriers, the team members, and the centers of influence. So with the clients, I think it's important we understand that there are different types of clients, that the 80-20 rule is real, that the top 20% of the customers are 80% of the revenue, the top 5% of the customers are 50% of the revenue. So when you look at it, you say, we really do have to understand who are the vital few clients versus the trivial many. Vital few versus trivial many. Well, the vital few, the A's and B's, the top 20%, those are the ones that really, really need to be proactively managed. Because here's the really nice thing about it. You do a great job with them, you're probably going to get a referral and introduction. You could replicate them. Every agency out there, every producer out there, if you would just replicate the top 20% of your customers, you'd grow by 80%, but you'd only add 20% more customers. That's a pretty good deal if you ask me. That doesn't mean we don't take care of the C customers, the bottom 80, but we sure have to differentiate the level of service that we provide. Our prospects, this is one that, gets back to the empty pipelines. Every producer, again, should know what a future ideal client looks like, and they should have a top 20 prospect list that they're working on. Who are the top 20 people you're going to be marketing to this year at a minimum? I remember one time, probably 10 or 15 years ago now, I was giving a seminar, and I asked the audience, I said, who are your best prospects? And some producer right in the front row said, I don't know, they haven't called me yet. That's a little bit more reactive, waiting for the phone to ring, answering it by the third ring. So we've got to do everything we can to get the prospects to do our drip campaign, do our social media, get them signed up to our blogs, and keep dripping them so that we truly become the logical next choice. Because my attitude is that every great account will eventually move. When they move, I'm going to be positioned as the person they're going to talk to. Our next one, the insurance carriers. My gosh, I can't talk about this one enough. We could probably do a whole session on this. Anybody that's listening, and there'll be a lot of them that used to be underwriters, and there may be even some company underwriters listening to this also. Well, one of the things, in fact, I just asked this yesterday with the group I was with. There were 10 people in a planning session with me, and 3 of them were ex-underwriters. And I asked the question, I said, when you were an underwriter, did you make a value decision on the submission you just received based upon the name of the agency and the producer? And they said, oh, yeah. And that's the real world, that every underwriter, the minute they see your name or your agency's name, they make a value decision based upon past experiences. That's your brand, the clear, powerful thoughts that exist in someone's mind for you. So one of the most important things we've got to do is know our carriers very well, meet with them on a regular basis, and we believe you have to have a process in place we call TOSS, T-O-S-S, what a surprise, another acronym, the top of the stack submission. What do we have to do to have the very best submissions with our carriers so that when they see our name, they say, this one's going to be complete and accurate, it's going to be in a class of business that we want, and it's going to have a real high closing ratio because this agency does a great job. Well, if we're not doing that, then our submissions and our stuff gets lumped in with everybody else. We've got to manage those relationships. Our team members, well, it's crucial. Like we said earlier, we can't get stuck in the service trap, but we've got to have great team members. So we believe in creating high-performance teams within the agency of the sales and service people working together. And as a salesperson, boy, you talk about where in relationships it's about deposits and withdrawals. George, I see way too often that the producers are expecting withdrawals without ever making deposits with their people. You know what? They've got a tough job. They have to sit there. They can't leave. I always love this one. I mean, let's face it, as a producer, if we get a little frustrated and things aren't going our way and we're kind of having a bad day, what do? We have an appointment. And we leave. Everybody goes, what is? And I'm going on an appointment. No, you're not. You're just getting out of the office. Your service team can't do that. So you've got to make sure that you truly have a high-performance team, that you're formally meeting, we believe, on Monday morning for a debrief of last week and a pre-brief of this week. And then you've got to leave them alone and let them do their job. Stop interrupting them. Stop calling them during the day and saying, hey, do you have anything for me? If I had something for you, I'd send you a text or an email. No, I don't. Stop interrupting me.
Good point.
And then finally, the centers of influence. In our perfect world, every producer has 10 centers of influence that are really name people, target people in specific industries. They're trusted advisors to other type of people we want to connect with. And we believe that if you're serious about this, you're going to go out and do something with them. And every time I ask producers this question, probably 90 to 95% of the time I hear the same response. What normally happens within 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 3 months after having breakfast, lunch, dinner, sporting event, round of golf, theater, concert, whatever, with a center of influence? Well, I get a referral. Gee, you wouldn't want to do that on a regular basis, would you? So why not have 10 centers of influence that you do something with once a quarter and you spread it out so you have 40 things you do over 12 months to help you fill your pipeline? But most people just don't take care of their centers of influence. And then the big thing, George, they don't thank them. They don't send them a thank you note. They don't send them a gift. They don't send them tickets to something. They just don't work the relationship. So every relationship's about deposits and withdrawals.
You know, this is a perfect opportunity for me to tell you that next week we're not going to have a guest. I'm going to be the guest. I've been working on something because I've come to the conclusion that when you and Scott Addis and some of the other top people who've been on Monday morning and I continue to work with have convinced me, and this is going to get your attention, Roger. The name of my presentation next week is going to be the 2 biggest threats to independent insurance agents. One is, in my opinion, commoditization. Now, you're going to slip when I tell you what the other one is, relationships. That's a big threat. And I'm going to leave it right there. Just enough said. Let's go to the last 2 things here. And then pay attention for next week, guys, because I'm using some of Roger's thoughts here, but build on them. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, mistake number 9 is no client plans. By that, I mean, all they really do is they go out there and they do insurance. Insurance is just one of the solutions you provide. But if the only thing you go in and talk about, the only thing you know, the only thing you understand is insurance, well, then you're commoditized, George. You're selling a commodity. You're a vendor of a commodity, and vendors' decisions are based upon price only versus being a trusted advisor who absolutely advises and puts together a plan. A lot of us will remember the old what was the thing, Fantasy Island, deplaying. Well, this is the plan, the plan. Do you have a written plan in place with your clients that says these are the things we will be doing for you during the next 12 months based upon our assessment that will help you deal with risk?
Wow.
And we know the plan works when we can say, do we have an actual annual service calendar in place for the top 20% of our clients? This doesn't mean you do something every month. This just means that if there are 3 things or 4 things or 5 things that you're going to provide, whether it's wellness programs, safety programs, employee engagement, disaster recovery, whatever it may be, that you have a plan in place. Because the nice thing about having the plan, saying this is what we're going to do, get the client to agree that's what they want, then it's pretty easy to do a stewardship report. This is what we said we were going to do. This is what we did. This is how it positively impacted your client, your account, your business. And it really comes down to knowing their business better, studying their business, again, becoming a specialist. And I forgot to mention we talked about specialists. Some of the people listening are in smaller communities where you just can't take one specialty. Well, then have 3 or 4, but just don't be the general practitioner. So when we know the business, we put together a plan. And the one thing that we absolutely stress is that every plan you have with your client is a 3-year plan. The insurance we know we have to deal with every year, but we're always looking out 3 years, because if you do a good job of risk assessment, you're going to have more items to deal with the client than you can possibly get done in 1 year than they can possibly deal with in a year. So we always want our clients in a 3-year rolling plan.
Mm-hmm. I got you. And then the service calendar, I like that idea too.
It's crucial.
What is it? I mean, just a regular calendar that
we just put together a schedule, whether it's a spreadsheet or we just say these are the things we'll do and here's the month we're going to do. It's really an action plan.
Oh, okay. All right, and your last one is lack of accountability.
Lack of accountability. Boy, oh boy, I really believe that without accountability, everything fails. Well, maybe I should put the word fails in quote. I do know this, that without proper accountability, most people will never reach their potential. And that's a sad thing. I'll never forget one of the very first consulting jobs I ever did, an agency in White Plains, New York. And I walked in, and on on the bulletin board above the coffee machine, somebody had cut out of a magazine a little saying. So the worst thing that can happen to an individual is to wake up at age 65, realize they've never reached their potential, and realize it's too late. Now, the reality is some people don't need accountability, okay? Most do, because I think left to our own accord, most of us will do the wrong things. So what we want to do is say, okay, how do we create a culture? And that's a key word here, George, a culture of accountability. Now, accountability itself is pretty simple. Did you do what you said you were going to do? And that's one of the biggest things we see lacking, is that people will, from a sales and management perspective, they'll deal with their producers, and they'll only talk about numbers. They don't talk about behaviors and strategies. Numbers are just the end result of behaviors and strategies. And it just drives me crazy when I hear a sales manager say to a producer, you better work on that closing ratio. Okay, I'll work on my closing ratio. Your pipeline's empty, get some more in there. Okay. No. Hold me accountable to the behaviors and strategies. We define culture as the language, behaviors, and strategies that are normal in a firm. What do you talk about? What do you focus on? And then did you do what you said you were going to do? One of the big issues, because sales management is really a tough thing in an agency. And the smaller you are, the tougher it is. There was a white paper that came out by Reagan Consulting, I don't know, 8 months ago or whenever, maybe last year, but they talked about organic growth in agencies, and they said even in the best ones, only 15% of them have full-time sales management. So one of the things we see that works much better is accountability partners, where we get the producers to get in groups of 2 or 3, and they hold themselves accountable to each other, where they're saying, here's what I said I was going to do, here's what I did. It's almost like their own mastermind group. We see it work really, really well, George.
I really, really like that too. And let's wrap it up, and then go ahead.
Okay. Well, the summary. All too often, in a good way, people call and say, we just don't know if we're doing the right stuff in our agency. We just don't seem to be growing the way we want to. We don't seem to be getting the profit we need. And everybody knows that there's only 2 things that really matter for the agency owners, and that's growth and profit. You want to improve the value of your firm, you better have top-line revenue, net top-line revenue growth, and you better improve your operating profit. Then you're worth a lot more money, because it does come down to value. There's something I was sharing with some people recently. You know what? Everybody eventually leaves their agency, whether they know they're going to or not. But everybody eventually leaves. Let's get a high value. So are you doing the right stuff in your agency? And as a producer, are you doing the right stuff? The answer is really simple. Are you getting the right results? See, if you're getting the right results, you're doing the right stuff. If you're not getting the right results, you're not doing the right stuff. So which ones of these mistakes have you been shooting yourself in the foot? Something that I firmly believe in is a concept of knowing versus guessing, and now a new one, knowing versus doing. Knowing versus guessing says that I know my KPIs, my key performance indicators, and more importantly, I know the behaviors and strategies that I have to change. So once I know those, then I have to do them. I mean, how many times have we all said, yeah, I know what to do. I know. And if you still have kids at home or whatever, and you say to your kids, hey, blah, 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 and they go, yeah, I know. Well, everybody knows. Knowing is the easy part. It's quite frankly, knowing is very simple. Doing is the tough part. And I always say, you know what? It's your choice. I guess the good news or bad news in this business is that you'll do okay even if you don't do these things. But again, I don't think you get the financial freedom. I firmly believe you are where you are today as an individual producer based on choices you've made. And at the end of the career, you'll be where you'll be based on the choices you're willing to make and the things you're willing to do. So, George, those are the big mistakes I see.
Well, I tell you what, my mind is racing like crazy because once again, every producer in every agency ought to hear this. This is the basic stuff of all times, and I congratulate you on being able to wrap it all up. There are 18 of these, and 16 or 18 or something in that article that you wrote for Rough Notes. Here's your contact information that they can go and to this. You got a lot of social networking stuff on there too, huh? And then yep. In the meantime, they can also go back to the email from which today's email, and there's a link to that Rough Notes article with those other ones in there. I think these things just should be on every agent's wall, Roger. Again, I don't want to be syrupy, but it's just a wonderful presentation, and I'm glad you did it. You've taught us so much over these years that people don't even know how many things they're doing in their agencies today, because you and Gary Holgate came along and said, this is what you really ought to do. I don't have time to tell people, but boy, it is fascinating stuff. Go back to the, once again, next week I'm going to be talking about those two biggest threats to agencies, and that is commodityism and relationships. That sounds strange. Well, we'll talk about it. And in the meantime, you can get the Insurance Community Center quiz flash back on the email, and get today's 5 questions on that, and you'll also have the E&O tip of the week. And then go in the Rough Notes there, you'll see it, and click on, and there's the archive, and there's these grades. They're getting better and better. Roger, once again, a heck of a job, buddy. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, George. Thank you.